Some of the richest people I know drive ordinary cars, wear the same few t-shirts on rotation, and honestly, they have more money than most families build in decades. If you're working hard but your bank account keeps bleeding out every month, this video might actually change everything. And here's the thing, it's got nothing to do with earning more money. Instead, it's about 7 invisible habits that quietly wealthy people use to build fortunes, while everyone else stays stuck. And here's the crazy part. These habits are so simple, most people completely overlook them. By the end of this video, you're going to see exactly why looking rich keeps you poor, and why being quietly wealthy actually makes you free. But before we break them down, there's one habit that quietly destroys everything, and most people don't even realize they're doing it. Most people think building wealth means tracking every dollar, budgeting all the time, and obsessing over spreadsheets. And honestly, that's exactly why they stay stuck. Trying to manage money with willpower alone? It's like trying to hold your breath underwater. Eventually, it just gets too hard. So how do people who quietly build fortunes do it without thinking about money every single day? Well, there's this thing called decision fatigue, and it explains a lot. Back in the early 2000s, researchers did a study on judges. Yeah, actual judges. They wanted to see how decision fatigue affected the choices they made. And here's what they found. Early in the day, judges approved parole about 65% of the time. But by the end of the day, after making hundreds of decisions, that number basically dropped to 0. So what does this have to do with money? Everything. Every time you sit there deciding, should I save this? Should I spend that? Your brain is burning energy. By the end of the month, when you're exhausted, you're way more likely to make mistakes. That's why relying on willpower alone to manage money doesn't really work. This is where automation comes in. And no, I'm not talking about some complicated system with 1,000 moving parts. I mean simple stuff. Setting your money to move automatically before you even see it. Here's an easy way to do it. Step 1, open a separate savings account. Step 2, set up an automatic transfer on payday. Doesn't matter if it's $50, it still counts. Step 3, do the same for investments. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is removing the decision. Because once your money moves automatically, you literally can't talk yourself out of it. Wealthy people figured this out decades ago. They set it up once and mostly forget about it. And that's habit number 1, the lazy wealth builder. But here's the thing. Even if you get this right, there's a second habit that quietly drains your wealth faster than anything else. And it's hiding in every purchase you make. Most people think they're being smart with money by hunting for deals, buying cheap, grabbing discounts. But here's the catch. Being cheap isn't the same as being valuable. So what's the difference? And how do wealthy people think about spending? Well, let me tell you a story. I have a friend who spent $250 on a pair of work boots. I thought he was crazy, until 5 years later, he was still wearing the same boots. Meanwhile, I'd bought 4 pairs of $70 boots in that same time. I spent $280 and my boots were falling apart. He spent $250 once and his still looked new. But here's what really hit me. Every time my boots broke, I wasted time shopping, comparing, and trying on new pairs. He never thought about boots again. He didn't just save money, he saved time, energy, and mental space. Wealthy people ask a different question before buying. Instead of, can I afford this? They ask, will this add value a year from now? If the answer is yes, they buy quality. If the answer is no, they don't buy it at all. This applies to everything. Mattresses, because sleep affects your health. Tools, because they make you more efficient. Education, because skills compound. But they won't touch designer logos, fancy cars, or status symbols. Because every dollar spent impressing strangers is a dollar that can't grow into freedom. That's habit number 2. Buy for value, not for price. But even if you master spending smart, there's a number most people completely ignore, and it's actually the only number that really matters. Here's something nobody tells you. Your salary doesn't determine whether you're rich or poor. There are people making $200,000 a year who are completely broke, and people making $50,000 who are quietly building fortunes. So, what's the difference? It comes down to one number most people never track. When I first started working, I was making decent money. Nice apartment, nice dinners, nice clothes. I looked successful. But one day, someone asked me, "What's your net worth?" And I had no idea. I didn't even know how to calculate it. So I sat down and did the math. Assets minus liabilities. What I own minus what I owe. And the number? Basically zero. 3 years of work, nothing to show for it. But then I met someone making half my salary, and his net worth was growing by $15,000 every year. That's when it hit me. Income is just water flowing through your hands. Net worth is what you actually catch. Here's what wealthy people do differently. They calculate their net worth every 3 months. They write it down, track it, and watch it grow. Because that number tells the truth. It doesn't care about your job title, your car, or your clothes. It only cares about one thing. Are you keeping more than you're spending? And once your net worth hits a certain point, something magical happens. You stop needing to trade time for money. That's when real freedom begins. That's habit number 3. Track net worth, not income.
But tracking numbers isn't enough, because there's a mindset shift that makes everything else possible. And without it, you'll probably quit before you even see results. Most people think in weeks and months. Pay rent this month, plan a vacation next month. But wealthy people, they think in decades. And that one shift, it changes everything. Here's what I mean. Back in the 1960s, there was a Stanford study called the marshmallow experiment. They put kids in a room with one marshmallow, and they said, you can eat it now or wait 15 minutes and get 2 marshmallows. Most kids couldn't wait, but the ones who did, they went on to have more success in life. Better jobs, higher income, more wealth. And here's the interesting part. It wasn't about willpower. It was about how they thought about time. The kids who waited weren't thinking about right now. They were thinking about later. And this is exactly how wealthy people think. They're not asking what feels good today. They're asking, where will I be in 10 years if I make this choice? And that question changes everything. It means skipping a vacation you can't really afford. It means saying no to upgrades. It means living below your means even when you don't have to. Because they're not chasing comfort now. They're chasing freedom later. And here's the math that makes it insane. If you invest $10,000 at age 25 and never touch it, by age 65, at 7% returns, that's $150,000. But if you do that every year for just 10 years, then stop, you'll have over $1 million. You only invested $100,000. That's compound growth, and it only works if you think long-term. That's habit number 4, the decade filter.
But thinking long-term isn't enough, because there's a hidden safety net wealthy people build, one that most people never even consider. And without it, you're one disaster away from losing everything. Relying on one paycheck? It's like walking a tightrope with no net. One slip, and you're done. But wealthy people? They never put themselves in that position. So how do they protect themselves? And what does multiple income streams actually mean? Because I'm not talking about working 80 hours a week. Income streams don't have to be huge. $200 a month might not sound like much. 3 of those? That's $600 a month. $7,200 a year. And you didn't trade hours for it. The goal isn't to hustle yourself to death. The goal is building systems where money comes in even when you're not working. That's habit number 5, the income fortress. But here's where people ruin everything. The moment their paycheck goes up, the trap hits. You get a raise, and suddenly you're eating out more, buying nicer things, upgrading everything. Within 6 months, that entire raise is gone. This is called lifestyle inflation, and it's the silent killer of wealth. So how do you avoid it? There's a famous story about Warren Buffett. He's worth over $100 billion, but he still lives in the same house he bought in 1958. He still drives a normal car. He still eats at McDonald's. People think he's cheap, but he's not. He just understands something most people don't. Every lifestyle upgrade is a permanent expense. Once you upgrade your lifestyle, it's almost impossible to go back. Here's the strategy. When you get a raise, treat yourself to one small thing, maybe 10% of the increase. The other 90%, straight to investments. You still get to enjoy the raise, but you're not letting it eat your future. Because here's the truth. Looking rich costs money. Being rich creates options. That's habit number 6. Resist the upgrade trap. And that brings us to the final habit, the one that protects everything when the world falls apart. When markets crash, economies collapse, jobs disappear, most people panic. They sell everything, make emotional decisions, and lose years of progress. But wealthy people, they do something completely different. So what separates panic from preparation? Back in 2008, when the market crashed, most people sold their investments at the bottom and lost everything. But Warren Buffett, he bought, spent billions on undervalued companies, and when the market recovered, he made a fortune. Not because he was lucky, but because he stayed calm when everyone else panicked. Wealthy people have 2 things that let them do this: preparation and perspective. They have emergency funds, low debt, and diversified investments. So when chaos hits, they don't have to scramble. And they're not living for public opinion. They're not chasing approval. They're playing the long game. And that emotional control is what keeps them wealthy while everyone else starts over. That's habit number 7. Stay calm in chaos. So, those are the 7 habits. Automate your money, buy for value, track net worth, think in decades, build income streams, resist upgrades, and stay calm. And if you follow them, you're going to join the quietly wealthy. But here's what nobody tells you about these habits. They all have one thing in common. They require you to stop caring what other people think. And that's harder than it sounds. Because we live in a world where everyone's trying to look rich, driving fancy cars, wearing designer clothes, flexing on social media. But here's the secret. Looking rich is actually making you poor. Because every dollar you spend on status is a dollar that can't grow into freedom. So how do you break free from that trap? How do you stop caring what strangers think? And why is looking poor the smartest move you can make? I break down the entire psychology in the next video. Why looking poor is important. It's going to completely flip how you think about money, status, and wealth. Watch that next. See you there.